So, Rebecca,
What can we say?
can you explain how the volume or the value of 111 billion euros breaks down in terms of imports and exports, as well as between goods and services?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much, Françoise, for inviting me. Nicole. Thank you. Good evening. And first of all, I'd like to thank you, Françoise, for inviting me this evening to present the barometer. Thank you to Thierry as well for inviting me to the British Chamber, and to everyone at the Chamber and the British Embassy that have helped me in the preparation of this study. So going back to what makes 2022 a record year for bilateral trade, 111 billion euros, it breaks down into 51 billion euros of imports from the UK to France, up 35%, and 60 billion euros of exports from France to the UK, which were up 49%. So this is just year-on-year nominal increase overall of 42%, and the highest level of trade since 2019. To keep it simple, imports, exports, etc., throughout the presentation, the imports from the UK are in red and the exports from France are in blue. So if I mix it up somehow, that's the way to be looking at the numbers. Moving on then to how it's evolved since 2019, and why we're looking at 2019 as a more sort of normal year rather than 2021 or 2022, you can see that overall trade is up 13% on a nominal basis. And that's from both the UK and in terms of imports and exports. We saw there was a sharp drop, obviously, in trade in 2020, primarily due to COVID, and a slight improvement in 2021, but we really have a very strong recovery in 2022, back above pre-COVID levels. And exports from France to the UK show stronger growth than imports from the UK to France. The French trade surplus has increased to 9 billion euros.
So, in goods, which are the sectors showing the strongest growth?
Oh, I'll just break it down between goods and services first of all, and then breaks down as 2/3 of trade relate to goods, the exchange of goods, and 1/3 the exchange of services. France, and the blue columns, has a higher level of exchange exports of goods, whereas the UK, the red columns, have a higher exchange of services.
That's always been the case.
It's always been the case, and it's still the case. And the trends are very much similar in both the UK and France in exports of goods and in exports of services. Now, in response to your question about which sectors have seen the strongest growth, the strongest growth sector has been energy, up 138% compared to 2019.
We are going to have a special focus on energy.
That's right. We'll have more detail on energy a bit later on. But imports from the UK were multiplied by 3.5 in 2022, which is really what's driving that strong growth in trade. The next sector where we've seen a strong growth is in material manufacturers, up 32% compared to 2019. There we see France having a strong growth in material manufacturers, up 57%, whereas the UK was actually quite flat. Machinery and transport, which is the largest segment of trade in goods at 25 billion euros, was up 4% overall compared to 2019. And this masked actually growth of 15% in French exports and a decrease in UK imports of 7%. Then if you look at the material manufactured articles, this sector, that is down 25%, both in France in terms of imports from the UK to France and exports from France to the UK. And that reflects the challenges for manufacturing in both countries.
So what about services?
Looking at trade in services, apart from transportation and tourism services, all services section saw a growth in the trade, with strong increases in business services up 23%, in financial services 25%, and in technology and communication services, which were up 60%, which saw very strong growth, with UK imports to France up 67% between 2019 and 2022.
What would be interesting to look at it was what are the surpluses for each country between export and import? Which are the sectors which are generating the largest surpluses, and how it has evolved since 2019?
Well, I'm sure it comes as no surprise that the first sector that is in surplus for France is drinks and tobacco. France, which generates the largest trade surplus of above 3 billion euros. In fact, the trade surplus in drinks and tobacco has remained above 3 billion euros throughout the period since 2019. France is the leading exporter of beverages to the UK with a 32% market share. And equally, France is also the second largest importer of beverages from the UK. So it's really an important trade sector between the two countries. The next sector with the second largest surplus is chemicals and pharmaceuticals. This generates a surplus of 2.5 billion euros, and surplus is up 21% compared to 2019. But the actual trading growth in trade, was up 22%. Travel and tourism is a sector which is always in surplus for France. Here, the sector has seen the surplus almost divided by two. Although there has been recovery since COVID, the travel from France, or the service exports from France, remain 22% below their 2019 levels, whereas from the UK, they're back above 2019 levels. And then one last sector, which is the machinery and transport equipment sector. Historically, the sector generates a surplus for the UK. And whilst imports from the UK saw a strong increase in 2022, the exports from France almost doubled to 13.6 billion, creating a French surplus. So this is really quite an important turnaround in the French Franco British trade.
We have seen earlier that energy is a key sector, and it is a huge contributor of trade surplus for UK in 2022. Could you explain why?
Yes. So energy is the largest surplus for the UK, with a 4 billion trade surplus in 2022 compared to 2019, where it was actually in deficit. And the strong growth in trade for this segment is due to a higher energy demand post-COVID and supply constraints due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But again, I'll cover this in the next slide. I just wanted to mention two other segments which are in surplus for the UK, which is financial services, and which continues to have a strong 2.9 billion surplus, and technology and telecommunications, which see really strong growth since 2019. France is the second largest European market after Germany for UK technology. And so that really is a sector where we're seeing strong growth. Intellectual property is the only other sector in surplus for the UK. So it's not that it's one of the most important, but given the terms with the manufacturing industry, it's just the fourth one in the list. So let me now move on to explaining the situation on energy and the focus on energy markets. This is quite a complex explanation because there's a lot of moving parts in the energy market. I'll try and keep it simple and straightforward. So typically, France imports oil and gas from the UK and exports low carbon nuclear electricity. But between 2019 and 2022, we've seen some really significant changes, which reflect three factors: demand, supply, and price. First of all, in 2019, the various lockdown measures in response to COVID created a sharp fall in demand for energy and a really marked decline in prices. We can see that decline in 2019. But as the economy began to recover, in 2021, a number of supply shocks meant that energy demand increased faster than the energy supply, and this drove up energy prices. Now, in Europe, electricity pricing is largely linked to the price of natural gas, which in 2019, 45% of gas in Europe came from Russia. So Europe is highly dependent on gas, and 45% of this gas was coming from Europe. So when Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, and the imposed sanctions meant that Europe needs to find alternative sources of gas and increase its reserves of gas ahead of the peak seasonal demand, which is the winter. In order to attract imports from the rest of the world, mainly from the US, but also from Africa, from Asia, from all international markets, the price of natural gas prices skyrocketed. And in the summer of 2022, they reached an all-time high of 300 euros per megawatt hour. So the price of gas is driving the price of electricity in Europe. And that's what is causing this great, huge energy crisis and price shock. Now, France, which relies on nuclear power for 2/3 of its electricity generation, is relatively protected from high gas prices. But unplanned stoppages at several nuclear power plants in the summer of 2022 meant that instead of exporting electricity at high prices, France needed to import electricity. And these imports came from the UK because the UK was generating large amounts of renewable energy. The UK was able to sell that electricity to France through the interconnectors at nice high prices. So the blue line on the graph shows the French exports of electricity. The dotted red line shows the imports of electricity from the UK at record prices. And the full red line shows the increase in oil imports, reflecting the high oil price. So that's why in 2022, the UK generated, that's a simplification of why in 2022, the UK generated a €4 billion energy trade surplus.
Thank you. So we have a fabulous 2022 year for the Franco British trade. Is it going to go on for the investment first? Yes. Let's go for the investment. Okay. One point also we looked at was the attractivity of the countries. Are they still very attractive for investors? Both of them.
Yes, France and the UK ranks number 1 and number 2 respectively in the Ernst & Young attractiveness survey that was published recently. This attractiveness survey looks at the number of projects. It's the number of projects, not the value of projects in dollar terms, but the number of projects. And it showed that in France in 2022, France had 1,259 projects, up 3%, and the UK had 929 projects, which was down slightly from 2021. But what is interesting is that whilst France has the largest number of projects, the jobs generated from these projects, it's the UK that is leading the way with 47,000 jobs created compared to 38,000 jobs created in France. So these are really good numbers and show that both countries remain very attractive in terms of inward investment. And actually, when you look at the last year's numbers, which haven't been updated yet, both countries represent around 5% of inward investments in each other.
So now, definitely, this was a good year. And do you believe it is going to go on in 2023? We are mid of the year. Have we already got some information and data, which where we are and what are the trends?
The data that we have available so far is the trade in goods data from the UK Office of National Statistics. And so it's just trade in goods. The trade in services is not yet published for the quarter, and it's reported in pounds sterling, in billions of pounds sterling, and I haven't converted it into euros. But what that shows is that first quarter 2023, trade in goods exports and imports were up 18% compared to 2021, Q1 2021, and which is positive, strong growth. I don't know how it's going to look for the rest of the year, but it's a positive first quarter. And comparing to the fourth quarter of 2022, it's plus 2%. So this is just the first indicator of Franco British trade, and
looking good.
A good start.
You know, we should be optimistic and expecting like the trend are going on, even if we had 10 to 20% growth in the cross-channel trade. I think it would be a good result for 2023.
That's right.
I would say that as a conclusion, more than ever, 2022 has proved that the French and the British are strong economic partners. And that the Franco-British, and I must say also that the Franco-British summit held in Paris that Thierry mentioned a bit earlier, has confirmed that the commitments on both sides to promote cooperation to grow the Franco-British trade, and more specifically in key sectors like energy, mobility. And I think we have been strong partners for 120 years, and we are going to be strong partners for an additional 150 years. But I am now going to hand over to Scott, hoping he agrees with my words and comments and not challenging the figures. Thank you guys for your support as well.
First thing to say, absolutely, Councillor, absolutely agree. Hi everyone, my name is Scott Ruby, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Department of Business and Trade in Paris. I'm going to do what every other. I'm going to start with some thanks, and first thanks actually go to colleagues at the Chamber, in particular to Kathleen and Thierry, for making me feel so welcome when I arrived in Paris at the end of last year. It's been very clear to me since the outset that Chamber and British Embassy in Paris have a very special relationship, and I'm absolutely committed to making sure that relationship continues to grow and thrive. Next, I'd like to thank colleagues working on the Parliament, Rebecca, Francoise, Guy in particular. It's a fantastic piece of work with some fascinating insights. And I'm pleased to be able to offer you some remarks, both on the Parliament, but also on the state of the Franco-British relationship more generally. And that's where I'd like to start. I think, Francois, you alluded to it there at the end. Things are going pretty well. 2023, 6 months in, it's been an exceptional year so far for France and the UK, with the Franco-British Summit on the 11th of March, really highlighting that. The Prime Minister was hosted here in Paris, along with a delegation of cabinet ministers by President Macron, and they really committed to an ambitious forward-looking agenda, which was fantastic to see. And from an economic perspective, I was pleased to see that the recommendations made by our very own UK-France Business Forum were listened to by the leaders of both our countries. I think it's a significant achievement. And some of those important areas, like clean energy, clean tech investment, and mobility, which the Business Forum focuses on, were absolutely front and centre of the joint declaration made by both countries, and that's great. So the summit was really a big deal. I always think back to the front page of the newspaper Libération on the day of the summit itself. We saw a picture of Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister, and President Emmanuel Macron giving each other a little cuddle underneath the headline that read "Content de vous revoir." It was a really nice moment, and a sign of what's to come. And we at the British Embassy in Paris really feel the positive times lie ahead for the UK-France relationship. We consider ourselves on a nouvelle voie. So now on the barometer, I think clearly this is a fantastic piece of work, and things look to be progressing really well, which is absolutely fantastic to see. I think it's safe to say that in recent years, global economic headwinds, those macro factors, as well as the political dynamic, let's not pretend, has made the relationship between the UK and France challenging, and it's made life for business more difficult than it could have been. And the stats here that have been presented in the Parliament really highlight for me businesses' ability to adapt and be resilient, which is fantastic, reassuring, and not surprising. So a few reflections. I think firstly on exports, we're back at 2019 levels, at pre-pandemic levels, money terms. We've already said it, Rebecca's already said it, but I think it's worth underlining again that is absolutely fantastic, that it's the best year on record, and certainly the best year on record for exports between the UK and France in value terms. And what's more, we saw that we have complementary economies. France is particularly strong on food and drink, Council, please, and on other sectors like chemicals and pharmaceuticals, and the UK continues to be strong with services, with technology. Yeah, exactly. Finance.
No surprise.
No surprises there. So absolutely complementary. So on exports, the story is very good, and we also saw that on investment, the story is very good. The results of EY attractiveness survey are absolutely welcome. We continue to see that both countries feature in each other's list of top 5 inward investors, which is great. So this all looks great, but back to the earlier point, we do recognise that business still faces challenges, and there's still a period of adaptation. And we see that by engaging with business. And we feed that back into the policy-making machine to make sure that policy decisions made in the UK are informed by the needs of business. And that links to some of the final points that I just wanted to make, which are about how my team work, really. The eagle-eyed amongst you, or the government nerds, will have noticed that in February, there were some machinery government changes in the UK, some changes to structures of various departments, including our own. We were previously the Department for International Trade. We focused on investment and trade promotion, trade policy, the negotiation of free trade agreements. Now we're the Department for Business and Trade. So that means that we do all those things we did before, but the business experts who used to work on business policy in a different department now sit under the same roof as us. And that means that we can provide a really good, coherent offer for business when it comes to support policy making. So that's good. But for my team here in France, actually, practically, there's very little change, which is a good thing. I have a team of around 30 trade and investment advisors divided into sectoral teams and split across Paris, Bordeaux, and Lyon. And fundamentally, their job is to help businesses to grow and create jobs by investing and exporting. And actually, I think those objectives will sound very familiar to people in the room because they're pretty much the same objectives as those of the Franco British chamber. And I think that underlines a really important point, which is that no one is a lone wolf in this endeavour. We're all partners, we're all working towards the same thing. And we're delighted to be able to partner with the chamber in the way we do. So I'd just like to finish on that point by underlining our commitment and our support for the work of the chamber and CCI. We're looking forward to championing the anniversary and celebrating it with you over the year to come. And I'm really looking forward to the party on Resident. So thank you, everyone, and content de vous revoir.
Two of those nice words. That's true that we are complementary and we have only one target, to grow the post-channel businesses. That's for sure.